Make my staff cry? Have some free revenge. Many years ago, and for many years, I was a bank manager. So apologies in advance for any banking lingo I use, but it's all relevant. This was around the time that Visa/MasterCard debit cards, which only use your own money/savings, became a regular thing, but some older customers couldn't wrap their head around it. We had a regular customer who was always rude and complained about anything that he could, whether it be the way someone didn't hold the door for him or the bank stealing his money again. An actual complaint, as people perceived bank fees/transaction fees as us stealing. For the purpose of this story, we will call him OC, old and cranky. I can honestly say he was the worst person to come into any of my branches ever. One day, OCC comes into the branch and starts verbally abusing my counter staff. This is the third time he has come in believing that someone is stealing money from his account linked to his debit card. I check the transaction history and agree, the reference numbers are a bit odd. Usually just 8 to 12 digits long without much of a description. These amounts are ranging from $20 to $100 and occur pretty regularly, definitely enough to warrant an investigation. The issue is that we have replaced this same card 2 times now. The cards have different numbers on each of them, so it couldn't be a case of someone stealing his card details, since we close and block the previous cards each time we order a new one. The cards also cost $10 for a replacement, so Old and Cranky is of course yelling about all the money we are stealing off of him. We are charging more fees for the new card, definitely my fault. No problems, OC, but this time I'm going to get our investigations team to look into the matter because, well, I want to know now. OC doesn't care about the investigation, just wants his new card. Again, no problem. Keep in mind that each time this customer came in, he was obnoxious, rude, and impossible to deal with, so much so that he would regularly cause different team members to cry. Being a small bank, upper management obviously needed to try to keep every customer they could, and this guy happened to hold a bit of money with us. So a bank being a bank, they refused to close his account and move him on. About a week later, I get the results back from our investigations team. They make me ecstatic. Numerous times I read over the report and it quickly became my favorite reading material. I'll come back to this very soon. Again, cut to a short time later and we can see OC with his wife storming towards the branch. Even 60 meters away and you could see he was angry and ready to blast anyone in his way. Well, hello guys, I'm anyone. He walks straight into my office. He and his wife sit in my chairs and he actually throws his home printed transaction history into my face, while unleashing his full force of hate against me. I was called every name under the sun to the point where he was bright red, choking on his words as the abuse couldn't come out quick enough. The funny thing is, I expected this. I knew it was coming. I had aligned my chakras for this moment, I think. I've never been more prepared for anything in my life. I felt the single bead of sweat run from my forehead. I'm ready. OC, you need to explain to me right now what the F all this is, or I'm going to the police. Yes, of course. I actually had our investigations team look into the issue with these transactions. But I honestly believe it might be better we speak in, private. Just you and I? Absolutely not. You just want to lie. All this bank does is lie and steal my money. Please, OC, I really want to talk to you in private about this. If not now, did you want to come at a later time, meaning without your wife? You better start explaining right now or I'm calling your head office. Cool, let's get going. I pull out my beautiful manila folder. At this point, I'm shaking from excitement. Here's a list of the sources of the transactions. Should I begin? You should have looked into this when it first started. All right, here we go. phubpremium.com, russians.com, peeingwomenonhuts.com, and russianbrideswebcams.com. Watching his face drop with fear was probably my biggest achievement in life. Yes, that's all good, don't... And then his wife chimes in and says, what? Nothing. I know what it is. That's okay. No need to confirm. And I just go on. collegegirls.com, myfreecams, and his wife just says, oh my God. At this stage, he rips the paper out of my hand. I can see his wife watching her husband's innocence fade before her eyes. She is shocked and is already asking more questions, but he has had enough of me for the day. All sorted, love. Let's get out of here. My mistake. I have never seen an old man get up and leave that quickly in my life. It would have been 10 seconds max, and he was already outside. His wife yelling at him and shoving him as he walked away, defeated. My colleagues and I still reminisce about this event a lot, even years after we've all left the company. This is that story that we talk about each time we see each other. It gave us a special closure on his behavior. He never came back to our branch again while I was there. but I hear he was very lovely to the staff at the next branch a few suburbs over. I just don't know what he expected. Like, did he not realize he was being charged for those things? That seems like old man behavior. So yeah, that seems pretty likely that he was buying these things without knowing it, and then when they all showed up because they were trying to be discreet on his statement, which is, pretty alright by the company, good for them, he's like, oh, what are these? The bank is stealing from me again. But he didn't notice the lack of charges? Look, man, this guy had some serious old man syndrome, and he sure was cranky. Story 2. Fire me from a job I hate? I'll still torment you. A few years ago, I worked at a right-wing media organization. It didn't align with my politics, but I won't get into how I ended up there since the story is already long. It was an aggressively stupid and amateurish operation with bad pay and clueless management. My boss was a complete idiot, totally unqualified, and hired primarily because of his connections and political leanings. During his training, he ignored the IT people who were teaching him, chewing gum, looking at his phone, and generally just being a jerk. This will be important later. He didn't like me because I A. disagreed with him politically, B. am not a woman he can harass, C. had no respect for him, and D. was far more capable at the job. Because of all of this, he schemed to get me fired with completely fabricated complaints. He wasn't important enough to fire me himself though, so he told all these lies to his boss. I fought back and had proof that almost all of the accusations were lies. They briefly backed down, but this just pissed him off more, so I just got axed about 6 weeks later. However, since we all knew the reasons were complete lies, they gave me an enormous severance payout to keep me quiet. So I got a ton of money to leave a job I hated. However, he was too spineless to even be in the office when I was fired. He came in later that day to avoid me. Since nobody escorted me out, again amateurish operation, this meant I was still in the office unsupervised after they canned me. Given our small team and staggered shifts, it meant that he would have to do my job for about 4 hours until the next capable person came in. Sabotage time. I went into our video editing software and website CMS and changed a million little settings he'd never figure out, since he never paid attention when he was trained and is an idiot. As I left, I ran into him sneaking in late through a side door, obviously trying to avoid potentially encountering me. I just laughed at him. As the day went on, I got many gleeful updates from my now ex-colleagues in other departments about how he was losing his crap trying to cut and upload video but couldn't get anything to work. They could literally hear cursing and shouting through the office walls. More sabotage. Also, he was too stupid to change the password to the company Twitter feed where they posted all their news and videos. Dozens of posts per day. So for the next few months, I would log in and randomly delete various updates, which drove him further up the wall. He eventually changed the password, but here's how stupid he is. Soon after, he posted a photo of his new team in the office, including the office whiteboard. On the whiteboard in the background, he'd written down all of their social media passwords. I continued doing it. Unfortunately, on the day that I decided to delete the entire Twitter account, they'd changed the password again. Oh well. Epilogue. A few months later, I walked into a movie theater and saw him. He saw me too and, no joke, hid behind his copy of that free movie theater magazine. Tribute? After the show, I decided to hang around the main exit to the theater just to see what he'd do. He headed towards the door, saw me, spun around, and headed for a side exit. Someone blatantly making up lies to try and get you fired that they tell the boss is like middle school behavior. That, coupled along with the fact that he was actively avoiding even trying to see you because he couldn't deal with confrontation, this is like straight out of the 5th or 6th grade on just a higher scale. The generous severance package sounds nice, so I think OP made out like a bandit. Story 3. Whole street laughing at local thief. Years ago, I owned a laundromat on a busy metered street with only on-street parking available. I owned multiple locations and had a few maintenance trucks for the help to service my location, plus property I owned here and there. For whatever reason, I had to leave one of my trucks in a parking spot in front of my store overnight. The next morning, we found someone had stolen the battery. Worse, he had cut out the radiator as well, rendering the truck immobile. We called police, they came, took a report, and then wrote me an expired meter ticket and told me to get the truck towed or keep feeding the meter. Yeah, thank you very much. Anyway, word filters in that a certain person was seen that night fiddling with my truck. He lived in a boarding house down the street and worked the street daily with a stolen shopping cart scavenging for scrap metal. He had a non-working truck parked in front of his building and, sure enough, my crap was in the bed of his truck. I just took it back. The guy was a regular customer of my laundromat and we were always friendly, so I was shocked this guy would do it to me. This was a pretty tight-knit area, so everyone soon knew what happened. I never confronted him. Well, a few days later, he came in to do his laundry. 2 top loaders worth, pretty much all the clothes he had, I suspect. As per usual, he would load up, start the washers, and take off down the street to the local coffee shop. This day, some SOB came in while he was gone and stole all of his clothes, leaving him with only the clothes he was wearing. I told him we didn't see a thing, and our laundromat was not responsible for unattended clothes. For days, he walked around the neighborhood complaining about some guy stealing his clothes from the laundromat. Everybody had a hard time keeping a straight face. Narrator's commentary. I'm always surprised about hearing things like this happening in tight-knit communities. Like, you're obviously going to get found out, and you're going to be, pretty much excommunicated, if that makes sense. It's just, a really stupid risk to take. By telling him that you didn't know who stole his clothes, you were kind of just like, yeah, you're not part of the community anymore. If you leave your clothes unattended, that's on you. Which is a super fair and a little petty revenge. Although, not that petty, because he did actually steal from you and make a truck useless. That's pretty bad. This just sounds like revenge, actually. Don't insult the catering staff, especially during your wedding. So before I get to the story, I like to clarify 1, this is not my story, but my neighbor's. He doesn't use social media sites such as Reddit, but he did give me permission to share his story here. 2, I wasn't sure whether or not to share this here or on Pro Revenge. 3, this story took place a couple of years ago, so my neighbor might have left out some things that he may have just forgotten. Alright, now on to the story. Back in late 2019, my neighbor, let's call him Tim, attended his best friend's wedding, the groomzilla of this story. From what Tim told me, him and Groomzilla had been friends since middle school, somewhat relevant for later. Tim was one of the groomsmen for Groomzilla's wedding because, they're friends. Fast forward to the wedding reception, and all is going well. Tim walks over to the bar to get a drink. For context, the bar was close to where the catering staff was serving food when, out of nowhere, there was an argument where the catering staff were. Sure enough, Groomzilla was being verbally abusive towards one of the caterers. The argument, from what Tim was able to understand, was over some food that the catering staff stopped serving because they ran out of a certain meat. This was 2 hours into the reception. The guy in charge of the catering stands between Groomzilla and the person Groomzilla was berating. The guy in charge tells Groomzilla to stop berating his staff since they have other food they can serve as a plan B. But Groomzilla didn't like that answer, to which he responds, "It's not my fault you, Latino slur, can't do things right. Just serve food like I hired you to do." Turns out the person Groomzilla was berating was Latino. Fast forward about 20 minutes and Tim witnesses the catering staff stop what they were doing and began putting the food into metal containers and begin loading it onto one of the vans that belonged to the staff. And the propane grills that they were using were being loaded onto a truck that one of the staff brought. Sure enough, word reaches Groomzilla and he makes another scene. Since it took place outside, almost everyone didn't notice except for Tim and the security guard. Groomzilla threatened legal action for breach of contract. But the guy in charge of catering countered the threat by threatening to call the cops on Groomzilla for racially abusing one of his staff members, and that he has witnesses including the catering staff who saw everything, and Tim, who just happened to be nearby. From what Tim told me, that got Groomzilla to shut up and walk back into the venue. After the wedding, Tim told Groomzilla that what he did was horrible, but Groomzilla tried to convince Tim that he did nothing wrong, but before he could continue, Tim stopped him and told him that the friendship between the two of them was over, since he still couldn't see the bigger picture of what he just did. So, moral of the story, don't be a racist, egocentric idiot. I feel like Tim was just the perfect stand-in name for this story, don't you think? Like, of all the people to be a bystander and to just witness something like a horrible racial abuse, it's just Tim. It's just Tim. Tim's just standing there. It just makes sense. And yeah, you can't abuse people and then expect them to continue to do their job. They have every right to leave there. This groom sounds like a nightmare, and I feel sorry for the woman who married him. Story 5. Took all my decorations and signs out of the apartment and let the plant unalive. My college roommate was pretty much your textbook narcissist. She was an only child dating another spoiled only child, and I usually did most of the things around the house and clean our bathroom from the messes that they both made. He also had plants in our apartment, which I regularly watered because he never did, and I had lots of plants back home. My final straw was when she left a bunch of blood from meat on the counter and said she'd clean it later, and never did. I decided enough was enough, and living together was ruining our friendship, and I told her I'd move out. Understandably, she was upset, but then she says it's fine, the house will be cleaner without you anyway. This is when I saw red. All the decorations and cleaning supplies were mine. I took down every single thing, even tiny things like flowers and Clorox wipes. I also stopped watering the plants, which died pretty fast. I still feel guilty about this one. And I refused to do anything in the house or use the kitchen, which of course turned dirty. I visited her after I'd moved out, and the house was in disrepair. It smelled bad, dead plants were everywhere, and the kitchen was covered in grease and dirty plates. There wasn't a single thing in the living room, and she had the audacity to ask me if I'd give the vacuum back because it was basically the house vacuum. even though I paid for it and was the only one who used it. I said no. TLDR, my roommate and I had squabbles and I moved out, and she had the audacity to ask for my stuff back. I said no. Is stepping back and just watching what happens really revenge? OP was getting taken advantage of, and then they left. And then the house went to ruins. Like, that doesn't even sound like revenge. It seems like what OP should have done. Either way, it really sounds like OP's roommate got what they deserved, so it works for me.